Frederica's Anime Pizza, the one pizzeria that the public would not expect. The concept was originated from a few pizzeria creators who visited Japan and decided to make something original, something that is not to be expected by American customers. They decided to build another Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Since the long line of old-fashioned pizzerias were popular from the 70s to the 90s. Except instead of using animatronics fully based from the original characters, the creators decided to use anime characters. In the end, the creators decided to call it Frederica's Anime Pizza. The pizzeria was made up of 5 separate sections, rooms constructed: the main dining room, the concert arcade room, the bar section, the Pirate's Cove, and the souvenir corner. The building is also built with kitchens, a back room, a manager's office, and a security office. Knowing that the building has a bar, you can tell that the building is not made for children. While there's some companies following Freddy Fazbear's legacy, creating pizzerias for children, Frederica's is mainly aiming for adults. Men and women are to be served by either employees or the animatronics with meals or drinks. The animatronics were made with a special kind of silicone material for skin. Each of them is modeled as a human-like anime girl with personality, clothing, and feminine body shape of her own. As soon as this concept was finally shown to the public, many adults liked the it. Who wouldn't want a pizzeria that not only could you have fun without screaming kids, but you could also have food and beverage served to you by an attractive anime girl? This is when the true legacy of Freddy's comes. From 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., customers drink and party to their wallet's content. However, at night, the animatronics gain their own consciousness. From what the creators gathered from the 1987 incident, the robots back then weren't given a proper night mode. The same thing might be happening to the animatronics, because at night, the animatronics would go in a certain kind of crazy. Where they would be getting at is that the animatronics would force the building's night guard into sexual activities. And usually the animatronics would be harsh enough to end up killing him, either by suffocation or accidental disembodiment. The building's manager or its creators didn't know what to do about it. Every night guard they would hire to watch over the place, some people would either quit or die. When they hired a new night guard to watch the place, they could pray that God would keep him, her safe. Except this night guard is not what people would expect him to be either. 12 a.m. In the building, only a few small lights illuminate each room. In the concert room, 3 main animatronics stand and wait on their round, colorful stage. The leading character in the middle is known as Frederica. From her torso to her legs, she wears a chocolate brown suit and dress pants. There's also a black bow tie and a pair of black dress shoes. Her face has brown eyebrows, and her scalp is covered with brown short hair in the form of a low bun. Her face is complete with numerous freckles, black eyelashes, and red lip gloss. On top of her head, of course, is a small black top hat. In her left hand, she holds a microphone. And for customers that would care, she was made with a lithe form, with some curvy and above-average breasts. The animatronic to her right is known as Bonnie, much like the original rabbit animatronic. She has blue eyebrows and bright blue hair tied into a pair of ponytails, the form of a pair of rabbit ears. She also has blue-colored lips and short eyelashes. She wears a sleeveless blue vest with a red bow tie and a white undervest, keeping her firm, average breasts in place. She also wears a blue skirt covering down to the middle of her thighs and black boots in length up to her knees. In her hands, she carries a red rock guitar hooked to a pair of speakers. The animatronic at Frederica's left is known as Chica. She has black eyebrows and yellow short hair that's in a length down to the middle of her neck. She wears a yellow t-shirt that reads, "Let's Party," and a pair of pink shorts with a length down to the middle of her thighs. Her feet wear a pair of orange shoes. Unlike the other 2 animatronics, she appears more revealing with her t-shirt barely covering her stomach and her larger breasts are barely being kept in place. As the clock hits 12, Bonnie opens her green eyes. As she raises her head to the clock on the wall, she smiles before turning to the one hall that leads to the night guard's office. Then that smile slowly fades and her face is replaced with guilt. She puts down her guitar and walks to the office, deciding that it would be best to just talk to the night guard instead of straight up trying to have sex. She continues to take one slow step after the other, despite cameras watching her. When she reaches just a few steps away from the office, protected with a magnetic door ready to lock her lock, she takes a deep breath before taking a step closer. She knocks on the window and a flash of light beamed from the ceiling to reveal her. However, what the light revealed to her was something that she didn't expect. It appears to be a humanoid creature with an average man's weight, 7 meters in height. It only seems 8 feet tall by the way it sits on a chair. The man, if you can call him a man, has his flesh covered with dark blue scaled skin. The inhuman wears a sleeveless jean jacket over his white tank top shirt. A pair of dark jeans and a pair of dark casual boots complete the overall fashion of the man. Each of his fingers is ended with a sharp claw, 5-digit hands. Despite his scalp being with the same dark scales, his face is smooth and more human-like. His blank eyes make it difficult for Bonnie to tell if he's actually staring at her. The man looks like an overgrown lizard, which to her it seems like the most terrifying thing. Despite the coming fear, Bonnie clears her throat and pokes her head in the doorway. "Hello," she said. "You must be the new security guard. I'm Bonnie. And you are?" The humanoid takes a moment to bite into a hot wing, taking the meat straight off the bone, and just stare at her. After what felt like an eternity, he turns his head to the door. The door frame has the switches of the door and the light functions, but he turns his eyes back to Bonnie. He should probably give her a chance instead of judging her up front. He wipes the sauce off his lips before he does anything else. Bonnie watches him push himself away from the desk, letting his rolling chair move with him. They appear to be in the same height, despite the tall figure sitting. She looks at him, forming his reptilian lips into a smile. It's when she hears a sudden, low-toned voice coming from the office. "Talon," he said, offering a clawed hand. "My name is Talon." A smile slips across Bonnie's face as she shakes his hand. Her brain suddenly collects the feeling of his scaled palm on hers, but she tries not to blush on a first impression. Talon smiles as well, and he turns back to the desk. Bonnie looks over his shoulder, scanning the cameras with him. Realizing that she's still there, Talon clears his throat before he turns his head to her, to avoid some awkward moment. "So, are you expecting something tonight, or did you just come to say hi?" he asks, smiling. "Oh, I just wanted to see you," Bonnie answers, holding her arms behind her back. "Usually the other girls get some of the night guard before I do." "Oh, they do, huh? Don't you ever want to be the first for a change?" Bonnie shrugs. She smiles at him and waves goodbye before she walks out. Talon watches her leave before he looks back to the cameras. From the time he moved into the state, he needed the money to thrive on the human world. Well, at least his friend who normally gets the food and other stuff for him and his friends, it was his friend who actually got a job good enough for him. It also pays good for him, and he can always give the money to her. Now all that Talon wants to do is spend the night in the pizzeria, eat his pizza, and probably make friends with these girls instead of straight up getting into pleasure traps. He takes a bite out of another chicken wing as he flips through cameras. He views the concert room camera where he sees Bonnie walking to Frederica with a smile on her face. She taps onto Frederica's shoulder, and the fancy-dressed animatronic opens her blue eyes. The place is still empty when Frederica opened her eyes. She turns to Bonnie, who happens to have an unusual smile on her face. She raises an eyebrow. "Bonnie," she said cautiously, "what's with the smile?" Bonnie couldn't help but giggle. "This," Frederica has to have a straight answer. She turns to her completely as she puts her fists on her hips. "Have you killed anyone this time? You look like you completely lost it." "No, Fred," Bonnie answered. "It's because of our new night guard. It's the first time I've ever had someone telling me his name without trying to seduce me. Sure, he sounded bored, but it was like he wanted none of it." Frederica frowns in curiosity. She steps off the stage and walks past Bonnie and then walks straight towards the security office. If there isn't going to be a guard who would satisfy them, then what is a night guard for in this building? "Wait, Fred," Bonnie called. "The night guard isn't exactly what you'd think he is." Frederica ignores her, taking every silent step down the hallway. She could see the shadow of a lizard-like creature. By then she stops, suddenly taken back. She shakes her head harshly, thinking that it's her mind playing tricks on her. When she reaches the office window, she leans forward and takes a peek in. To her surprise, it wasn't her mind playing tricks. It's what Bonnie was trying to tell her. Nevertheless, it's just another night guard. She straightens her bow tie and her top hat before she taps onto the glass. Talon hears a tap. He frowns by the sudden noise. Could be that Frederica girl. He actually shut the door a minute after Bonnie left. He doesn't know why, but it just felt safe for no apparent reason. He tears the meat off another wing before he turns to the window. It only took one of his blank eyes to widen by the sight of Frederica's face. Sure, it's made of silicone and robotics are under that skin, but the animatronic's face still looks beautiful in his eyes. Her whole body, in fact, looks like she's being showered in twinkling lights in his eyes. When he took a quick glance up and down anything the window reveals, he could already tell the well-dressed female has a very attractive body, much like Bonnie did. Talon quickly picks up a napkin and wipes the buffalo sauce off of his reptilian lips. For some reason, he doesn't want to look like a slob in front of her. He didn't really want to look like one in front of any of them, really. Frederica's expression is nowhere near different. At first, what she sees could almost terrify her, but when she caught a gaze with the beasts, she could have sworn she's staring at a pair of pearls. The way she saw his expression turning from slightly aggressive to full shock, she'd wish she would be able to blush, knowing that a beast could be stricken by her. She takes a quick glance onto Talon's own body, acknowledging all the features of the creature's built. Suffice to say, Frederica thanked to her creators that she couldn't be able to blush in front of him. However, she still feels embarrassed. She reluctantly clears her throat. "Hi," she said. "I'm Frederica, the leading entertainer of this pizzeria. And your name may be?" "Talon." Talon replied, "I didn't realize that you would be waking up on an early night." "Oh, that's just because Bonnie woke me up. She came back with a wide smile on her face. She said that you were the first to give her your name without trying to seduce her." Seduce? Frederica widens her eyes and turns her head away. Apparently, Talon didn't know about what's been happening. Perhaps she said the wrong thing at the wrong time. When she returns her gaze at Talon, she sees his tilted head in confusion. "You see, there's a perk to this job," she said. "Every night, the night guard is to be visited by either one or two of us and do sexual activities with them." It didn't take a hard effort to make Talon hide his blush. However, he keeps his cool as he taps his claws against the desktop. Frederica notices this but tries to shake it off. "However, there are times when we can go rough at times," she continued, "and end up killing the poor night guards." "Apparently those guys weren't tough enough to take it," Talon said. Frederica turns her head away, feeling both guilt and a certain heat of emotion. She lays a hand on the window glass and turns to him with a determined look on her face. "I'm going to cut to you straight. Your rules are simply keep the place safe and sound from trespassers, and you are not to leave the pizzeria from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. You may do as you please, but there is a toll to pay every night." Talon just stared at her for a brief moment. He then shrugs. "Name it," he said. "Each night, you are to tinker with each of the animatronics that are in this building," she replied. "Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Balloon Girl, whoever. They all equally want what human females get. In fact," she knocks on the magnetic door. Talon quickly turns his gaze on the door and then back at her. "Open the door," she calmly said. Talon tilts his head in confusion. He looks at the door switch, thinking about pressing it. However, he doesn't trust this animatronic woman that much. He reluctantly takes his distance away from the door. "What happens if I do?" he asked. Frederica only stares at him. "I want to make an example," she answered. They both stare at each other for what feels like an eternity. Then something happened that neither Talon nor Frederica could comprehend. Talon, like he was put into some spell, presses the button without hesitation. Frederica, caught off guard, slowly walks into the security room. Although small, the room is big enough for 3 people to fit in. Talon doesn't turn around even when Frederica walked in, only for his head to follow her. After a brief second, Frederica slips a smile across her face, a very seductive smile. Before Talon could process what's happening, Frederica slowly unbuttons her suit top. A minute passed, and she slides the suit sleeves off of her arms, revealing a black bra holding her breasts in place. She hangs the suit top on a hook placed in a wall behind her before she unbuttons and slides down her dress pants. She delicately folds the pants and lays them under the hanging suit. As the ceiling light hits Frederica, Talon could see her black panties exposed to him. She looks down at him, analyzing his nervous smile. She frowns. How can an inhuman, one that is as built and as vicious-looking as him, could be nervous to an exposed woman? Either it was intentional or not, Talon just stays still when Frederica kneels in front of him. He watches her pull his belt, pop the button loose and pulling down the zipper. As soon as she opens that one place and peels the white boxers, she begins to realize something. Talon, unlike most men, has a slit in his body where his manhood should be, and just on command, he was quick to have himself hard and ready for her. By the sight of it, Frederica's eyes widen. She turns her gaze at Talon's blushed face. She smiles seductively as she kneels in front of him and wraps her fingers around him. After a second of licking her lips, she leans forward and slides the base of his member and bobs her head up and down slowly. The sensation causes Talon to growl in pleasure as he caresses the back of her head. Suddenly, she stands up, staring directly into Talon's blank eyes. She reaches down her panties and slides them down to her ankles. After she kicks them back to the folded pants, she reaches behind her to undo the clamps of her bra. After the bra falls to the floor, her firmly soft breasts relax on her chest, while her chest itself lifting deliciously as she breathes. She takes a step forward and caresses his head, gently laying his cheek to her breasts. Talon reluctantly opens his jaws a bit to slide his tongue around each of her breasts. He could hear Frederica hiss and moan in pleasure before he could feel a source of heat on his crotch. Then he feels something wet and tight squeezing him, much like something heavy crushing an apple. He gasps when he realizes that Frederica is sliding her body down his member, forcing him deep inside her until he hits her one pleasurable spot. This sensation made her gasp in pleasure, whereas Talon growled because of the constant tightness. Not that he would complain, it actually feels good. After what felt like an eternity, Frederica begins to pick up her pace as she slides up and down his hard member, panting and moaning. After each thrust of Talon's hips, Frederica's speed begins to pick up more and more. Each impact on her sweet area makes her pant in pleasure and forces Talon to watch her breasts bounce and her head hanging backward. He could have sworn she's about to break. Unlike her time with any of the previous night guards, this time with him makes Frederica feeling so good. It doesn't feel like a boring session like it did before. She pants hotly as she suddenly falls in love with him for no apparent reason. After long minutes of Frederica moving up and down on Talon and Talon licking and caressing Frederica's breasts, Frederica clutches her teeth as she feels an intense heat building up inside her. "Talon," she said weakly, "I'm going to..." She suddenly screams before she could finish her sentence. Her fingers clutch into Talon's stomach as Talon could feel some sort of intense heat. Talon blushes by the fact that an animatronic just released her molten lava when it should have been impossible. However, as he watches her gripping her breasts while subsiding through her pleasurable release, he decides that it doesn't matter at the moment. Frederica takes one last deep breath before she opens her eyes towards him. She leans forward to kiss Talon up and down the left side of his neck. Talon growls as he nuzzles his head against Frederica's as he slides his hands onto her thighs and back. As if he flipped a switch, Frederica moans and begins grinding her entrance against him. "You know I don't mind you coming inside me," she said. "After all, an animatronic can't be pregnant." Talon smirks, even though he found that fact obvious already. He grabs Frederica's arms, and with his hardened manhood still in her, he lays her stomach first on his office desk. He begins thrusting slowly but hard into her, forcing her to moan in pleasure. Like Frederica did, Talon speeds up his thrusts each time he hits that highly targeted place inside her. The reptilian beast surprises Frederica by how hard he hits into her. He hits so hard the metal desk begins to shake despite being pinned to the tiled floor. Frederica has to hold on to the desk to keep it from shaking to no avail. Both Talon and Frederica's pants start to grow hotter and hotter as it's Talon's turn to be dominant. Must be his animal instincts, but at times, he couldn't help the feeling of doing this to her. Nor would he have the pleasure of disappointing her. machine or not. Suddenly, he feels an intense rising up his body. He growls in pleasure as he moves in an extremely fast pace, in a way that not even Frederica could be able to handle it. Because of the intense force and speed, Frederica's eyes roll up to their sockets and her artificial tongue hangs out of her smiling mouth. This feels incredible. The mere animalistic speed and force that he is giving to her is overwhelming. She can't hear herself think or can't even think at all. After a few minutes, Talon and Frederica scream and roar as Talon releases something hot into her, and Frederica's entrance clamps tightly around the reptilian. Talon makes a few strong final thrusts before taking himself out of her and collapses onto the chair. Talon takes a few deep breaths as he closes his eyes. He slowly opens them so he can see the back view of Frederica's body. He slides his gaze up her back until he shares a gaze with Frederica looking back at him. They smile at each other for a moment. Frederica slowly walks to him and sits on his lap. She cuddles herself more into his arms, listening to his fast-beating heart calming down. "That was amazing," she said. "Yeah," Talon replied through deep breaths. "It was. I wish it could be like this on every night." "You can, with all the others in the building." He said, "All of them?" Frederica nods. She sits up to meet Talon face to face. All of a sudden, Talon nuzzles his head against hers, growling in pleasure. Frederica couldn't help but wrap her arms around Talon's neck, keeping him close. "Can I sleep with you?" she asked. Talon thinks about it for a minute and then nods. And with that, Talon holds Frederica in his arms while Frederica keeps Talon in hers. She kisses each side of his jaw before letting him fall to deep sleep. 6 a.m. Talon opens his eyes. He sits up to scan the office. His security tablet lies straight and neat on the desk. The tiled floor is polished and cleaned like nothing happened. It almost feels like a dream when he had sex with Frederica. That is when he sees an envelope taped to the office window. He leans to the window and takes the envelope off. He uses a claw to cut it open and pulls out a pink letter that was folded in it. "Talon, you were amazing. Have I ever told you that what happened my first time? The other girls had their first times, but you are my first. And you are also the only one I would have sex with forever. I love you with all my artificial heart. Love, Frederica. P.S. Whenever you want to play with me again, turn off all the lights in your office. I go rough in the dark." Talon couldn't help but smirk to the idea. Sounds like a plan for tomorrow night. He takes the letter with him and walks out of his office and out of the pizzeria. However, not before he takes one last glance at his sleeping Frederica and smiles. He opens the door and walks down the sidewalk nearby the pizzeria. Even if it's 6 a.m., Talon would have to hurry back home before anyone could see him and, panic. For what it's worth, he's going to be spending the entire day thinking about Frederica and what she would have in store him on the future nights.